There's always a certain charge in the air when Celtic step back onto the pitch, and tonight had that feeling straight away. The kind of night where the support turn up, knowing fine well what's on the line. 5 wins on the spin, a farewell to Martin O'Neill, and the confirmation of Wilfried Nancy coming in as the new manager, all landing at once, building that sense of transition that only a club of this size seems to live with such intensity. Celtic Park wasn't quite filled to the brim, but there was a real buzz about the place, an understanding that this spell, short as it's been, will stick in a lot of people's memories. Even before a ball was kicked, you could sense a sort of quiet gratitude hanging in the cold air. Once the match got going, it looked pretty much as most folk expected for this stage of the season. Tired legs, a brutal schedule, and limited options thanks to injuries made it clear that it wouldn't be a night for fireworks, but rather one for graft. It was the type of game where everyone in the ground knows that the aim is simply to take the 3 points and move on. O'Neill himself, always honest as the day is long, said afterwards the team looked a wee bit worn, and he was spot on. The pressure of the last few weeks catches up eventually, but even so, the group found enough in the tank to control the tempo, keep Dundee at arm's length, and get the job done. The starting side held no real surprises. O'Neill's been sticking with the same core recently, giving the team a steadiness that's been rare during such a turbulent period. At the back, Scales and Sara kept things tidy and assured. In midfield, Engels, McGregor, and Hatate once again showed how strong they are when their movement is aligned. And out wide, there was just enough spark to let Celtic shift gears when needed. The first half wasn't breathtaking, but it was assertive enough to make clear that the rhythm of the game belonged to the green and white. Hatate, for his part, showed again that wee touch of magic he finds when he's playing with confidence. The goal came from him threading a pass with his weaker foot through what looked like a hopelessly crowded box. The sort of action that reminds supporters that football doesn't always need to be complicated. If anyone in this league can find an impossible window in a packed defense, it's him, and Young read it perfectly, drifting into the space at exactly the right moment and finishing it with the calm of someone who's been doing it for years. A sharp flash of class on a night that could easily have been just functional. Of course, it wasn't flawless. Dundee did what Scottish sides often do when they face Celtic or Rangers: sit deep, narrow the box, and wait for a mistake. And they had their moments, especially after that loose ball from Scales, which nearly gifted Simon Murray a goal. They also carved out a few half chances from set pieces, the sort that keep reminding players and fans alike that you can never drop your concentration in this league. Even when Celtic have more of the ball, more shots, and more territory, there's always the danger of one daft bounce turning things upside down. It's part of the chaos and charm of Scottish football, and anyone who follows it knows the feeling all too well. The pitch was slick, the night was freezing, and the ball seemed to take on a mind of its own at times, skidding about unpredictably. It was exactly the sort of evening where a deflection, a mishit clearance, or a simple slip could decide everything. That's why the team knew they couldn't afford to switch off, and while the attacking edge wasn't as sharp as in recent matches, the build-up play was still decent. There were wee bursts of quick movement, neat triangles around the box, and a handful of shots that only stayed out because the Dundee keeper was having one of those nights. The second half demanded more grind than glamour. There was one lovely bit of play where Engels flicked the ball first time. Hatate took it on, skipped past his man, and fired a left-footed effort across goal, drawing a brilliant save. It would have been a goal to lift the whole stadium. But even as it stayed out, it served as a reminder that this group can still summon genuine quality even in a scrappy match. The real worry of the evening turned out to be the injuries. Marcelo Sarra came off looking gutted, already seeming to know he might be facing more time away from the pitch, and even Kasper Schmeichel, after a heavy collision, looked as if he'd taken a knock. He managed to stay on, thankfully, but the concern lingers. With options already stretched thin, losing more bodies would be a serious blow. And the fact that O'Neill kept the squad this steady, despite all these limitations, is a big part of why this run has been so impressive. And that's the deeper story behind the whole night. O'Neill walked back into a club that was emotionally battered, with the board under fire, the atmosphere heavy, the team struggling for belief, and the away form sinking into something close to a crisis. Yet, in the middle of all that, he managed to shift the mood. He restored competitiveness, tightened the dressing room, and reminded the players that winning is still within reach, no matter how rough things get. Ending this short spell with a run of victories, a cup final secured, and a climb back toward the top of the table says far more than any statistic could. Younger supporters might have heard tales of O'Neill's influence in years gone by, but now they've had the chance, even briefly, to see a bit of that presence for themselves. It isn't only about tactics, intensity, or results. It's about his aura, his leadership, that unmistakable energy he brings when he takes hold of a group, turning a small window of time into something that leaves a mark. And the funny thing is that while everyone else is celebrating what he's done for the club, O'Neill himself seems uneasy with any spotlight. He'll slip off the pitch quickly, give a modest wave, and move on as if nothing remarkable has happened. As the night wore on and the final whistle approached, the crowd seemed to sense that this wasn't just another midweek fixture, nor simply the end of a busy run. It felt more like the closing of a small, unexpected chapter, one that had arrived in the middle of chaos and somehow brought a sense of calm with it. Even those who had come along out of habit or to escape the cold for a couple of hours found themselves wrapped up in a feeling that's hard to define, something between relief, pride, and a strange kind of bittersweet joy. Celtic supporters have been through enough seasons to know when something has shifted, even slightly, and tonight carried that quiet shift about it. When the players gathered near the touchline after the match, you could see how much the moment meant to them. They didn't look triumphant or dramatic, but grounded, drained, maybe even a bit emotional. There were a few hugs, a few pats on the back, nothing over the top, but when O'Neill walked past them offering a nod or a muttered word to each one, their reactions said everything. These weren't gestures for the cameras or for show. These were reactions to someone who steadied them at a time when doubt had begun to creep in. The connection between manager and squad might have been forged quickly, but it was real. The supporters stayed in their seats longer than usual, as if reluctant to let the night finish. A few chants broke out, nothing fiercely loud, but warm enough to echo around the stadium. Some of the younger fans tried to start something bigger, and a small pocket answered back. It never grew into the kind of roar Celtic Park is famous for, but it carried that familiar tone that blends affection with admiration. Even those who were quiet simply stared at the pitch, hands in pockets, breath fogging up in the cold, absorbing the moment. Sometimes football gives you these strangely gentle endings, the kind that settle into the memory without any fireworks. By the time O'Neill finally stepped away from the pitch, the applause followed him like a soft wave. He didn't milk it, didn't turn around dramatically, didn't draw attention to himself. He just lifted a hand in acknowledgement and disappeared down the tunnel, leaving supporters to decide for themselves how much those few weeks had meant. And maybe that's the beauty of it. He never tried to make this about him. But because of that, everything became even more meaningful. As people filtered out of the stadium, conversations drifted from the match to the upcoming changes. Some were excited about Nancy's appointment, others cautious, a few even openly skeptical in the way football fans always are when it comes to something new. But there was a general acceptance that a fresh chapter was ready to begin. Nancy's reputation for building structured, modern sides has plenty intrigued. Supporters were already debating what shape he'd favor, who might flourish under him, whether he'd bring in a few fresh faces or stick with the core that managed to pull itself together under O'Neill. The sense of curiosity was palpable. Meanwhile, the lingering concerns about injuries and depth sat heavily in the minds of many. Every good run in football seems to carry its price, and this one might be paid in fitness. Sarah's situation especially cast a shadow. He's grown into such an important figure at the back, not just through his defensive work, but through that composure that steadies those around him. Losing him, even for a short spell, will require reshuffling that no manager, old or new, would choose, and with the fixtures rolling in without mercy, the timing couldn't be worse. Yet, if there was one thing this match made clear, it's that the squad has rediscovered some resilience, the kind that lets players step in and fill gaps without panicking. Players like Yang, Ingles, and even Scales, who had that shaky moment but recovered well, seem to have found an edge again. They look more confident, more assured in their roles, less fearful of making mistakes. And that might be O'Neill's biggest gift to Nancy, a group that believes in itself again, that no longer looks fragile when put under pressure. Confidence isn't something a new manager can install overnight, but it's something he can build upon if it's already there. And tonight suggested that it is. Walking away from the ground, supporters were wrapped in scarves, hands buried deep in pockets, voices hoarse from the cold and from the match. You could overhear snippets of the usual post-match chat, praise for Hatate's creativity, frustration at the missed chances, concern about the midfield tiring too easily, speculation about January signings and the ever-present discussions about who might leave. But the tone, on the whole, was calmer than it had been in months. There was a sense of direction again, even if the path ahead remains bumpy. And amid all those conversations, O'Neill's name kept coming up, not in the nostalgic, mythical way older supporters speak about his great teams, but in an immediate, practical tone. People were talking about his steadiness, his honesty, his clarity. They were talking about the way he simplified things when everything around the club felt complicated. They were talking about how much worse the situation could have been had he not stepped in. And even those old enough to remember his glory years seemed surprised by how much of his presence they recognized in this short spell. That's the thing about certain managers. They leave an imprint even when they're only around for a brief moment. It's not about tactics written on a clipboard or sessions on the training pitch. It's about atmosphere, about posture, about what players feel when they walk into the dressing room. O'Neill has always carried that gift. Tonight simply reminded everyone that he never lost it. As the lights dimmed around Celtic Park and the streets emptied, there was a sense that something had been restored, if only partially. Not perfection, not certainty, not some grand resurgence, but steadiness. direction, a belief that the team can face whatever comes next without folding. And for a club that's been rattled recently, that's no small thing. Looking ahead, Nancy will step into a situation that's far from easy, but far from hopeless. He'll inherit a group that's bruised but rebuilding, a fan base that's wary but hopeful, and a club that remains enormous even in its moments of self-doubt. The expectations will be high, as they always are here, but he won't be walking into chaos. O'Neill has handed him a platform, maybe not a perfect one, but a solid one. And that's more than anyone expected a few weeks ago. Someday, supporters might talk about this little interlude not as a major chapter in the club's history, but as one of those subtle, important turning points. The kind that keeps a season alive when it was starting to slip away, the kind that rebalances a team, just enough for something better to grow later. Not dramatic, not defining, but essential. Before we proceed, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications to receive all exclusive news about Celtic FC. Don't miss any details about your favorite team. It's extremely important for Celtic FC fans. A stir has swept through the East End like few others in recent memory, with murmurs growing louder by the hour that Munteanu has put pen to paper with Celtic in what insiders are whispering could be a record-setting deal. Parkhead has seen its fair share of bold moves and dramatic unveilings, but this one has supporters leaning over barriers and glued to their phones, trying to suss out just how big a coup the club has pulled off. Word from those lurking close to the negotiation table is that the Romanian forward was whisked through Glasgow under a cloak of near-total secrecy, slipping alongside club staff with the kind of hush normally reserved for covert operatives. Folk around Celtic Park swear they spotted an unfamiliar figure ducking into the stadium's back entrance late in the evening, while others insist they heard snatches of conversation about medicals, paperwork, and a fee so hefty it left even seasoned staff raising their eyebrows. Munteanu's name has been bouncing around the terraces for months, but few thought talks were this advanced, never mind complete. Yet the rumor mill is thundering now, claiming the deal is all but sealed, signed with a flourish and tucked away in a drawer until the club decides it's time to let the green and white faithful in on the secret. Some say the lad was blown away by the atmosphere, even without a match on. Others claim he's been eager for a move to a club with European ambitions and a support that belts out its songs like a force of nature. No one inside the club is breaking rank, at least not publicly, but the buzz is thick enough to chew, and chants have already started drifting through social media, fans imagining how Munteanu might slot into the front line, how his style could mesh with the squad, how defenders across the league might struggle to keep pace with him. Until the official word drops, it remains a rumor, albeit one swelling into a roar. But if even half of what is being whispered proves true, Parkhead may be on the verge of witnessing one of its most dramatic arrivals in years. Hello, fan. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as it means a lot to Celtic FC. Also, share your opinion about the news in the comments below. See you in the next video.